Every week we test, compare, analyze, and explore discs, plastics, and more. And even then, there are discs that slip past us. So today we're going to play catch up on not one, but 5 discs that we haven't had a chance to explore. Hey everyone, it's Greg from Six Sided Discs, and I'm going to put the new Birdie Disc Golf Rise, Weapon, and Reach, along with the Finish Line Chicane and Sector to the test. Now, we first explored Birdie Disc Golf last year, after we interviewed Scott Stokely on our podcast. He was putting with the Birdie Marvel at the time, and the Marvel, along with the rest of their lineup at that time, was pretty solid. Drew Gibson's Finish Line discs have featured on the channel in a couple different videos, where we've thrown both the Era, Supra, among a few others. So we're going to take some time to see what each of these discs can do in my very, very cold hands. And we'll kick things off with the slowest disc of the bunch, the new Finish Line Chicane. Rated at 4303, the Chicane is Finish Line's new overstable approach disc. And looking at it side by side with the Zone, the Chicane, unsurprisingly, bears quite a bit of resemblance to the Zone, like many other overstable approach discs. To my hand, the Chicane feels just a tiny bit shallower than the Zone, but otherwise there's very little difference. And while you may not throw it off the tee much, the Chicane is just as at home there as it would be on approaches. On backhand, it holds straight briefly before a smooth, dependable fade. And on forehand, it can straighten out a tad longer, once again finding that overstability. The real test for any overstable approach disc, in my opinion, is how it feels in your hand, because it has to give you confidence. And the Chicane feels pretty good. Like I said, it's a hair shallower than a Zone, so if you find the Zone a bit too chunky, you might prefer the Chicane. Otherwise, they are nearly identical. I give it a few throws on approaches, and I think it feels fine. The releases are okay, and I do like the plastic. But there is nothing that's going to take the place of my Castoplast yarn in my bag, as I'm sure you saw in our overstable approach flight numbers don't matter video. Have any of you thrown the Chicane? What do you think about it? Let us know in the comments below. Let's switch though from Finish Line to Birdie Disc Golf, into a disc that I'm very intrigued by, the Rise. Rated at 5402, it's designed to fill a gap right behind the Birdie Ultra, which flies and feels a lot like a Discraft Buzz OS. The Rise then is probably like a beat-in Buzz OS. It's overstable, but workable. Thrown hard and flat, it only holds straight briefly, at least for me, before fighting out with a steady and persistent fade. In fact, every time I threw it, I had a very similar result. But that's really what has me interested, because it's a mid-range that can get decent distance, but it's that stability that sort of limits the distance. Taking a step back though, Caleb threw the Birdie Ultra for us a while back, and we found it to be super overstable, even for him. For faster arms, the Rise might be a little bit straighter, but for me, it was definitely consistently overstable. Back to Finish Line now, and let's have a look at their next mid-range, the Sector. Now, I need to apologize in advance because the Sector is going to have me on my big flight numbers don't matter high horse here for a few minutes, because it's rated at 5401. But just no. Going back to their previous mid-range, the Supra that we've thrown before, it was supposed to be a straight mid-range. It was rated at 5.5, negative 0.5, 0.5. And for the most part, it was. Here's how it flew for Caleb about a year ago. And here's how the Sector, that's supposed to be more overstable, flew for me. And keep in mind, I have less power than Caleb, which makes it kind of unusual that this disc is turning to the right. When thrown flat, the Sector was consistently straight to understable, slowly drifting to the right. And for both the Sector and Rise, I am confused. In each case, these manufacturers made a disc that is incredibly close in stability to one that they already have. And especially with the Sector, the flight that I'm getting is actually overlapping with the Supra. It says it's more overstable, but in fact, it's more understable. Now, obviously, there are differences in runs of plastic, and the Supra may well have changed since we last threw it. But I'm curious what other players' experiences have been. So if you've thrown the Sector, please let us know how it flies for you in the comments below. Let's move up in speed, though, and take a look at Birdie's fairway driver, the Weapon. And right away, I have another bone to pick. Their other fairway driver, the very far-flying Strike, is rated at 7502. And once again, the weapon is rated with nearly the same flight numbers, 8502.5. In all of these cases, the Rise and the Ultra, the Sector and the Supra, or the Strike and the weapon, these discs occupy the sort of staple slots in a player's bag. We're talking about the most well-known, best-selling discs on the market, like Buzzes or Makos, like T-Birds. And of course, I understand if you're a new company, you need to make discs in these slots because everybody needs these. But if you're making them, they are of course going to get compared to these other companies' flagship discs, which begs the question, if you're already in competition with those super popular slots from other companies, why would you make another disc to go in your lineup that's in competition with your own disc? Like, how different can these discs be? Why not branch off and make a disc that's completely different or understable instead of overstable, or fill a different slot in your lineup? Okay, I obviously just need to take a deep breath. All right, rant over. Let's just see what this weapon is all about. Off the tee, it's a consistent, reliably overstable, accurate fairway driver. And that means this is where things turn around for the weapon, because it is nothing like the Strike. The Strike flew like a 7-speed destroyer. It got turn, fought out for a big fade, but it got crazy distance for a slow fairway driver. Which means the weapon probably flies the way that Birdie had hoped the Strike would in the first place. So I'd say that's a bit of redemption, and I'll come down off of my high horse and stop banging on about flight numbers don't matter until the next video in that series. Because we still have one more disc to try today, and it might just be the best of the bunch. This is the Birdie Reach. Rated at 12.5, -1.3. Of course, the same flight numbers as the Innova Destroyer. The Reach has a lot to live up to, because if you're going to give a disc those flight numbers, it better be good. And it is. In fact, let's just let the Reach speak for itself for a moment. The Reach, dubbed the People's Destroyer, flies so good. With just enough turn to give it time to fight back, it's in that sweet spot of stability, where I can throw it hard, even on a slight anhyzer on forehand, and watch it get a little lift, work back to flat, and then fade back. And I can't remember the last time I picked up a distance driver and threw it that well right off the shelf. And I think that makes the Reach the real standout performer today. While the chicane doesn't necessarily do anything wrong, it doesn't really shine in a category that is hyper-competitive. The Sector flies great if you trust that the next one you buy will also be straight to understable. But that's not what it was designed to be, so how will the next one fly? And the Weapon and Rise are great discs, assuming you have the power to handle them. But the Reach delivers, at least for me, what most Destroyer-esque distance drivers fail to deliver: an actual Destroyer-esque flight. Have you thrown any of these discs from Birdie or Finish Line? Let us know in the comments below. And also comment below what discs we should explore in the future. For Six Sided Discs, I'm Greg. We'll see you in the next one. But that's what has me interested, because it's a mid-range that can get moderate distance, but that stability really ensures. Let's move up and oh my gosh. Have you thrown any of these discs? If you like this content and want to see more, please consider liking the video, subscribing to our channel, or supporting us on Patreon. Your support makes this content possible.